Keeneland on a Monday and a Tuesday. How about that? Thanks so much for hanging out with us here. Gino Bacola alongside my good friend Barry Spears. Barry, buddy, it's been a crazy few days. We've found out that the weather at Keeneland is like disaster warning bad, that all time for people who have lived in the area. So instead of worrying about Friday and Saturday cards at Keeneland that would have been decimated by scratches, taken off the turf, probably run all over muddy tracks, they've pushed the racing back to Monday and Tuesday. They really couldn't push it back much farther than that because those are days that have a Kentucky Oaks prep and a Kentucky Derby prep. So if you start going back farther than a couple days, you're going to be kind of getting in the middle of horses' timing for the Derby, for the Oaks. Just not really something they could do.
Yeah, this is kind of the weather you'd see down here in Florida during like hurricane season, that would wipe this sort of thing out. But yeah, it was kind of unfortunate, especially for the people that made plans to be there opening weekend, stuff like that. I know things change, but I think 7 days of Keeneland is quite a treat.
So Monday will be what was supposed to be opening day with the traditional opening day stakes, and then Tuesday will be Bluegrass Day. So Barry, by Tuesday, when they're running, this leaderboard will look a little bit different. But this weekend in the prep races around the country, there's also the UAE Derby. You can't forget about that one. There's going to be some movement, and we're seeing some of the real major players on this list. You've got Owen Almighty, Citizen Bull. Flood Zone's going to be running in the UAE Derby. Journalism. Right now, David Aragona has installed him as what would be the morning line favorite based on his morning line odds that he puts together for horses on the Derby watch. Chancellor McPatrick. East Avenue, who was also, one of the better horses last year, will be running. So we're going to see a lot of things take shape this weekend with some big name horses running. Even at Santa Anita, like I'd say Santa Anita and Keeneland aren't the better betting races. Like the Wood feels like the better of the gambling race, but at Santa Anita and at Keeneland, where we're going to talk about, we could see one or two of the horses in there as like really, really top tier contenders if they run big races.
Yeah, they got more star power for sure between those two races rather than the Wood Memorial Aqueduct. It just seems like these top horses are probably going to be set. I mean, I think they might shuffle themselves around a little bit here, but I don't really see too many horses kind of coming into this. I mean, it's certainly possible, but I'd say probably the top 10 might be safe to get in this field, maybe, depending on the way things shake out west in particular. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be a real interesting Derby field, top to bottom. Nobody really stands out. I mean, journalism kind of separated himself quite a bit, but not to the point where I think this horse is just way better than everybody else. I mean, he's certainly good and has proven himself to be better now, but that doesn't mean that's going to happen on Derby Day.
So let's take a dive into the Keeneland All Stakes Pick 5 for Saturday. It's going to go as race number, or for Saturday now to Tuesday. We can see it was Saturday. So it'll go as race number 6. What's nice is they moved all the races, didn't have to move the horses' post positions, numbers, race numbers, anything like that, because they were able to just put the card from Saturday straight to Tuesday. And races 6 through 10 will be that all graded stakes pick 5 sequence with a couple grade 1s in the mix. We start out with the Appalachian. And in this one, Barry, it's for 3-year-old fillies. The two inside Cassie horses are so similar. It's funny. They like the same horse, Nitrogen and Vixen. We've seen them down at Gulfstream Park recently and win some stakes races. But Nitrogen was in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf, ran 3rd that day. Vixen was a little farther behind, ran 6th. But since that race, they've both come back and win 2 stakes races this year in 2025. They both have pretty good tactical speed too. Like they can sit pretty nice trips down on the inside. They really do look a lot like each other. Those are 2 of the major players in here. Then Towards the outside, you have a horse like Lush Lips, who was really quick, finished behind Nitrogen in the Florida Oaks, and also thought the 3 was pretty interesting coming in off of 3 straight wins over at Fairgrounds for Brad Cox. Who are some of the horses on your radar in this one, buddy?
Yeah, I didn't really think there's too many surprises in this race. You mentioned those 2 Cassie runners. They look kind of a cut above the rest of these. I mean, based on running style and how they're versatile and can be up front or off the pace. And those 2 should kind of control things. I tried to get around them, but I really couldn't. They've been running against the best competition and placing better against that same competition. I think that'll go a long way here. Another horse that kind of is on my radar that's coming off the layoff is Totally Justified.
Yep.
I think this horse could step up just because of the company that horse was keeping before the layoff. Obviously ran in the juvenile Phillies turf and didn't embarrass herself in that race, although she was a huge price, but got in a lot of trouble. This is probably the most logical spot. Getting blinkers probably helps as well to keep this horse in the game early. But those 2 on the inside, Nitrogen and Vixen, kind of look the best here.
One that I will probably include, and I agree with you. I'm using the thing pick 5 wise, like they're both players. They're not horses I would chuck out and try to play against. I'm going to throw the 3 in. I've just been really impressed visually with those races over at the fairgrounds, in particular, the most recent one, the March 8th one in that stakes race. They didn't go that fast early on. This horse was at the back of the pack and swooped the field, and she was still a little bit green even doing so. Like she took a few strides to kind of get straightened out, but she was really impressive. And when I see a horse that's winning, that's still like figuring things out, she might still like have another step forward she can take here if she's really kind of asked and she's needing to give all of herself. So I thought she was interesting from off the pace. And then one more at a really big price. I don't know if she's good enough to win, Barry. I do like Table Flirt and the progression that we've seen from her as well. Debut race, loses in a strong race where she's behind Lacara and Quick, and that's sprinting on the dirt. Then she's off from August to November, shows back up in November, and you just see her build in each of the races since, where she was an okay 4th. Then she came back with a much better 2nd. Then last time out, she had a really good trip. I love the way she won that race. I'm just worried about her getting hooked wide. But you do have Pratt. She's going to be a big price. I could absolutely see her being a hit the board type. And if anybody finds ways to work great trips out, a lot of the time it's Pratt. If you're looking for a bust out horse in this race, I don't mind this one a little bit moving in the right direction, Barry.
Yeah, no, it definitely fits the kind of improving sort that can win a race like this. My only reservation would be the Lasix. I mean, this horse ran without Lasix, didn't run a step, and then kind of turned it all around. It's kind of hard to tell if that really did the trick.
But it's always a great point. You have to mention it. I'm glad you do
Yes.
when we do, because it worries me and concerns me more when there are horses that are short prices, right? Like because maybe it'll be built in. And what you were pointing out, was it Lasix? Was it maybe like improvement?
Just
right?
getting better,
Just getting better, just getting older. She'd only run twice without the Lasix, right? So it wasn't like she had a whole body of work that we could use to compare and say, look, every time she was on and off Lasix, it's obvious, right? But always have to mention those types of things, and you want to be looking for them as gamblers, especially with horses that are shorter prices.
Yeah, I mean, usually it kind of stands out. I mean, with these young 3-year-olds getting in the stakes company, we'll see how that shakes out. But it's definitely like you said. If Table Flirt was going to be, let's say 2-3 to 1, it's more of a question than if Table Flirt is going to be 10 or 12 to 1.
Sure. So there's a look at the first leg of the Pick 5, the graded stakes Pick 5 at Keeneland, race number 6, which is now run on Tuesday. I'm going to probably say it wrong 5 more times, but keep in mind, Tuesday, April the 8th is when they're running the Bluegrass Day. We move to the Commonwealth, the Grade 3 Commonwealth. It's a 7-furlong sprint here. In this one, you will see the very fast Montalcino for Cherie DeVoe, who has won 3 of 4 and also has a monster win at Keeneland. Epic Ride was really good last year and now has kind of turned the corner again this year at 4, has won back-to-back races. Does most of his best work, though, on the synthetic surfaces. You've got Nutella Fella, who's probably a cut below this group, but overall, his body of work isn't bad. He's just going to need to get a little bit faster, I think, to beat them. Hoist the Gold could get a really nice trip in here. He has some serious back class. Hear Me Song is another one who's run very well at Keeneland and could be, really well spotted against a group like this. And then towards the outside, I think you've got what you're talking about off a 106 Beyer speed figure for Wesley Ward, but he's only faced New York breds in his career. So this will be a tougher group. Extra Anejo was a really highly regarded younger horse who hasn't really been able to stay on the track all that much over the last couple of years, but he certainly has talent. It's an intriguing race, Barry. Can they deal with the 2, or is the 2 just maybe too fast for this group?
Man, this is a doozy of a race.
I like this race to handicap.
Yeah,
it is.
this is very, very good race to attack, but I don't think anybody truly stands out here. This is kind of a rider's race to me.
Especially at 7, I think is what kind of is an equalizer, right? 7 furlongs is harder for these horses like Montesino to beat up on other horses that he's just way faster than.
Yeah, and I have to kind of question those races at the fairgrounds. I'm not really sure how tough they really were.
Sure.
We're gonna find out for sure, but Montesino kind of handled that competition fairly easily in that last race on February 22nd. So that's not a bad setup for this race. And honestly, I'm not really sure if this horse can handle this first jump into this kind of company. So I'm kind of against, but I like Nutella Fella a little bit here.
Okay.
Though hasn't run a bad race, to be honest. And that kind of goes a long way. And you see through the progression of this horse, unveiled against a decent, really decent horse in Fulmineo, and beat that horse first time out at Delaware, which was kind of surprising when you see how those 2 horses end up. And even the second place horse in that race, Linzer, has kind of blossomed into a pretty decent kind of horse. Then goes into the hopeful, upsets that race, runs a real good race against Bochum Dana, who at the time was razor sharp and really couldn't do much wrong. Then, things get a little murky. You don't see the horse for a while, ends up at Tampa in a fairly weak race and needed it. He definitely needed that race. The horse got beat, but was running good. Then in the Pelican had a wild trip at short price odds, but ended up winning. And Carmel Trip ended up coming out of that race and winning. I think that race is a lot better than what it looks like, even on paper. Even the race itself was kind of wild if you go see that race on February 8th at Tampa, the Pelican. But given the way this race sets up, Nutella Fella should be right in the thick of it and get a good trip, kind of stalking the speed. And I think that might be the best place to get first run. And I think that's what Nutella Fella needs. I'm not saying that this horse is going to be, overwhelming this field once he gets the lead, but just the fact that this horse is going to be in front might be the perfect thing. I'll give him a shot at probably a decent price.
Sure. I'm going to be right next door with Hoist the Gold. I'm looking for the trip, the same trip that you're looking for, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm looking for, this is a horse who likes Keeneland, who likes the 7 furlongs, and just look at from last year. So end of 2023, he wins the Cigar Mile. Remember that was that really biased day at Aqueduct where everybody on the front end was winning. He still ran well that day. I mean, he didn't run like a 109 Beyer good, but he ran well. He won the Cigar Mile, comes back out of that. They think enough of him because he ran such a big race to try the Pegasus World Cup. Runs 4th that day. Wasn't like he was completely disgraced. And National Treasure and Senior Buscador, they're just better horses than he is. Krupe, we're going to see running in a stakes race this weekend, getting a little softer company. Then he's in the Saudi Cup. So he's traveling, comes back off the layoff. He's in the Churchill Downs. He probably needs that race. Following that, he's 3rd in the Met, again behind National Treasure. And remember that race? That was National Treasure and White Abarrio. And White Abarrio just didn't show up. There was no other speed in there. And National Treasure just kind of cruised on the front end. I mean, and then the Kelly's Landing race, that's not a bad race. He's third behind Close the Game Sugar and Anchor. Like, he's starting to get back into form. Then, unfortunately, he's off from June all the way to February. When he shows back up, that's like the perfect return to the races in February. A soft group, you get a nice trip coming from off the pace. And if he just shows back up with that same exact effort, that's pretty good in this race. Like, that would go a long way here. And, you know, he's just proven, battle-tested. He's going to be in the mix for me. I've always been a fan of this horse, Barry, Extra Anejo, but he's like, when he jumps up and faces tougher company sometimes, he's not won those races. I'll say he's not been completely disgraced. Like in the Haskell, he's fourth behind Go Rocket Ride, Mage, and Arabian Night. That's a pretty good effort, you know? After that, he comes back and he wins. He's then in the Hanshin. He's going a mile. Maybe that's a little too far for him. Maybe when you look at his form, like he got a mile just on ability against a group that he's better than. But for the most part, mile and an eighth in the Haskell, maybe too far. Mile in the Hanshin, maybe a little too far. Mile and a 16th in the West Virginia's Governor Cup, maybe a little too far. Cut him back to 7.5 last time out. Much better. The big concern, I just wish there was a race. A recent race. I wish we had a January or a February race for Extra Anejo, and this was his second start back as a 5-year-old, because now we're getting from September to April. That's a pretty good amount of time off now.
I want to say yes and no on that.
Because maybe he's the type of horse that needs the time off, right?
That's what it seems
fires
like.
The big races fresh. That could absolutely be. Look at his races. Debut, crushes at Keeneland. Fresh at Churchill Downs in his second start, really good second behind Federal Judge. Fresh at Churchill Downs in 2024, wins coming off the bench. So you're right. Maybe he is one of those type of horses that's a little bit fragile. That's a bad way of saying it. You're right. He runs so hard. He just needs time after those races to come back and run another big race.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Because look at his workout pattern. I mean, he's like clockwork. Mm-hmm. So I think they just have to handle him a little bit delicately, unfortunately. But when he's out there, he runs. And like you said, the question mark with him is the stakes competition. But I think the distance is the equalizer. I think 7 furlongs is his best distance.
Yeah. What do we do with the New York bred here? What you talking about?
I think that's part of the pace. She's part of the pace and
wide and having to go 7.
Like
for me,
because Best Actor is going to get in the mix along with Montesino.
Yep.
Any
Epic
horse
Ride,
like that,
maybe.
I think Epic Ride will take back
sit
slightly. This horse has shown that he can pass horses, and I think just that slight adjustment might be all the difference. And I'm going to give that one a shot too.
Let's see. Any others in here worth mentioning? Ashcroft, what you talking about? We talked about Extra Anejo. Hear Me Song is another one who likes Keeneland and could sit a decent trip, right? Has been proven at Keeneland and has been proven at 7 furlongs. There's some
layoff. That's the only question mark.
And he's not quite like the other horses at the layoff, right? This is a smaller barn, like just not the type of connections that, or the type of proven horse necessarily repeatedly off the layoff. But yeah, he's class-wise, he's not dismissed by this group. He just may not be in his best current form right now.
A long shot, Surly Furious. If things collapse, that one might come running late. You know, a lot of those mile and the 16th races might end up kicking in late in a race like this. This horse can close, has some races that could win this one. Just needs the setup. If this horse gets the setup, he might be tough at a big price. I think he's going to hang around and get in the picture, you know, try supers kind of thing. You know, just one to think about, especially if it collapses up front.
Another tricky pick 5 race where Barry and I aren't really sold on the favorite as a single standout horse. Respect Montesino, but there's other speed. Those races, we're not quite sure how strong they are. And it just looks like a fun race where you can find some other prices to include in your pick 5s. Race 7, the Commonwealth on Tuesday at Keeneland. The Grade 1 Madison is going to go as race number 8. It's a filly and mare sprint, 7 furlongs on the main track at Keeneland. Emery, the number 2, was a really unlucky loser of the inside information. When you and I were at Gulfstream on Pegasus World Cup Day, she had a bizarre trip. We can kind of watch the race because her and Mystic Lake both come back out of the race. So important one to watch. Yeah, she was a little bit. So she's the 9 and Mystic Lake is the 7. And they tried to have Emery just kind of out in the clear, making sure she wasn't in trouble. But she ends up getting hooked really wide in this small field. It's just a field of 5. And look how wide she is all the way around. And this was her first start in a couple months. And this was her starting point of the season. So I thought she ran pretty well. You could see kind of at the top of the lane, she's looming up. It looked like she had some run. And then right about here, when Jody's Pride sneaks through, it kind of like hurries her a little bit. And I think she got sort of outrun because all of a sudden you see Emery, she's back here. And right at this point, she almost looks like she's done, like she's backing up. And then all of a sudden, Emery kind of gets into a nice stride and her class puts her right on even terms on the outside. And I can't, go without giving Mystic Lake credit. She's very honest. She battles down on the inside. She battles off Jody's Pride. But look at Emery kind of surge. That was such a weird, like, in-between race where she's up on the put, like, pressing. Then she drops back. Then she comes on again.
You know what that reminds me of? It just reminds me of a horse that was too fresh.
Yeah.
Like, they kept her. They kept her way off the rail to not get her into a runoff situation.
Yep.
And it was a smart move by Tyler. He really tried to keep her together.
Mm-hmm.
I expect her to run more professionally, a lot more solid in this race. But all in all, I think it's a match race between Mystic Lake and Emery again, unless they fall apart. There doesn't look like too much speed in here either. So I think those two are going to go at it from the jump and kind of.
I just think she's going to get so much out of that race. Emery.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
she just, and I respect Mystic Lake a lot. To me, there were only 4 horses I looked at, and unfortunately, like none of them were prices. Like I couldn't get to the bigger prices in here. I do like Scylla. I think is worth trying to beat at a shorter price, but I do respect her ability. Like her Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint was really good. She had like a very similar trip to Emery, actually, in the race that we just watched, where Scylla was, for some reason, like way too close to a fast pace. Way too close. Then she kind of backed up. Then she came on again. And remember, the race fell apart with Soul of an Angel winning from way out of it, who Barry told us a little bit about earlier in the week when we talked about that Breeders' Cup race. So I respect her. The one that I'm kind of the most curious about, though, is Justique, just because in following her through the years, Barry, she debuts, and after she wins her debut, she was the next coming of Zenyatta. That was sort of like the buzz about her. She came from way out of it. She was so impressive sprinting. You'll notice her second start in the Chandelier, going a little bit longer, she flattens out. Her third start, they cut her back to a sprint in the Des Arnaz. She wins. So she wins 2 of her first 3 races. They're both sprints. She has 9 dirt races overall that you can see. 4 of them are wins. 3 of them are thirds. She has 4 dirt sprints, and they're all the wins. So all like 6 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 5.5, and 7, all wins. She's the type of mare who runs better sprinting with a target. She just needs a little something to chase. Now, I don't think, like you're saying, I'm a little worried that she's going to get that in here. I don't know if they're going to be battling, but sprinting is her game.
Yeah, this is the best trip for her, for sure.
And it's 7 furlongs in particular, I think might even be her absolute best trip. And Cherie DeVoe has been so good. I think she's going to run a big one, Barry. My only concern would be, like, I'd like her. I wish she was like 6-8 to 1. And if there was like one more speed, but I still will probably use her in a few spots because I wouldn't be shocked if she runs a big one. She didn't sit that far out of it 2 starts back. And then in the carousel, she got a great opening on the inside and was able to move through, but she certainly has some ability. And it's amazing, right? There were 12 races in between dirt sprints, and the new barn takes her right back to a dirt sprint and she wins.
Yeah, I think Cherie kind of understood how to train this horse, because you'll see the drastic difference. I mean, she's getting more out of this horse in the morning, and it's showing in the afternoon. So I think that the way they're training this horse now gives her a lot better shot than it would have been, like, let's say, last year. Um, I think
Completely
they're
agree. They
changed tactics almost to get this horse into the race earlier, and it's making her finish a lot better. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if she runs really well here. I think, though, just my gut feeling is that we're probably 2 races away from this one breaking through.
Sure. Yep. She's fun because she was one of those horses who she wins her debut in the Cherie DeVaux barn, and then I picked her in a fantasy horse racing league I'm in this year, and I already feel really good about it because she was like the last pick in the draft. Because people are like, oh, that Justique horse, she
Shows up. I mean,
right,
she doesn't always win, but she's always around it, and that's in situations like that in a fantasy league, that's what you want. You want your horse to be around it.
and you kind of know now she's got her niche. Now she's for the year she'll be a filly mare sprinter. And I hope she just runs well in this race, and it'll kind of put her in this division. You could see her come back in a month in the Humana Distaff, right, at Churchill if she runs well here, and that could be a really nice season for her as a filly and mare sprinter. That's the Grade 1 Madison. Looks like there's a top 4. Mystic Lake is a millionaire now, is a multiple graded stakes winner. She's the type of horse who you kind of try to beat a lot, but she just she always shows up with a really good effort. Easy to excuse the cotillion race and just say that was too long. Like, she's just a very honest horse, Barry.
Yeah, absolutely. Just every time, you know what you're going to get. The problem is just others.
Let's move to race number 9. This one is the Shakertown, a 5.5 furlong turf sprint where there's no real standout on paper. Run Carson has been good form, but draws the rail. Our Shot comes off a pretty disappointing effort last time out, but has some very good races last year and some really good ones at Keeneland. And the same can be said for Arzak, who hasn't been in really winning form since last year's Shakertown, but horse who likes Keeneland and could certainly beat a group like this. Rogue Lightning is the new face who just won the Duke and Sprint last time out, and Flavian Pratt jumps aboard. Certainly wouldn't have to be a monster to beat this group. I mean, what do you do with the horse like Valentine Candy, who's been really good on the dirt? He's trying the turf for the first time. Then towards the outside, others that are a little bit interesting, Coppola, who has been excellent at Gulfstream Park, really fast and a 10-time winner. A lot of ways to go in here, Barry. Who do you want to mention?
Yeah, this is a really tough race. But I kind of found that it was sort of speed challenged. There really wasn't much speed in this race, if you really break it down, which gives the advantage to Coppola, I think.
Coppola's
I want to
really quick, and
I want to try to beat this horse, but it's almost like this race falls into this horse's lap, because if you can get by the dirt horse, Valentine Candy, there's really nobody that's going to be on the front end. Maybe Run Carson, but I don't think they really want.
And he's not that fast, right? Like,
right.
He's not like sprinting at 5 furlongs, getting the lead in sub 20 speed. You're right. I think with the outside draw, that forces him even more, right? Coppola. It's not as if he wants to come from way off the pace either. I think he's just going to go.
Right. He's got to step on the gas. I mean, there's no way he sits on this horse, and it's kind of win or lose. That being said, I also think that Run Carson could sit an excellent trip. Same with Our Shot. Those two actually could sit really, really good trips if Coppola clears this field, and they'll just have to run him down. The horse that beat Run Carson at Turfway is kind of a
Grade 1
monster.
winner. Yeah,
right. He's kind of a monster, and I liked Run Carson that night too. And there wasn't really much separating those two horses.
No, we looked at those races. They were good races. Those Turfway, that December 14th day where they had the all stakes. I think pick 4 it was. It's a good field. The way you mapped it out, I kind of put them in order because I do previews for a lot of these races where we have to give them our top 4 picks. I had 10, 2, 1, 4 as my top 2. Those are the same. You mentioned Coppola right away, who I had on top. Our Shot. In watching the race too, he absolutely needed the race. He never really seemed comfortable in the race either, like, from the very beginning. So I'm going to give him a big shot back. Look at his 4 races at Keeneland. 198, 95, 94 buyer speed figures in those races at Keeneland. Just some really, really good efforts there, and a couple of the victories. So I was 10-1-2. I do respect Rogue Lightning as a new face, wild card.
Yeah, you kind of have to just because of the class,
Yeah.
but you'll see in those past performances, especially in the ones that actually have comments, there's a lot of dwelt starts and
Yeah, he's not.
slowly away. So that's really going to hurt his chances. I'm really interested to see what kind of price you get on Rogue Lightning because
He could get
honestly,
overbet in here, right? Like in a
or
race like.
underbet. It could go both ways, depending on what you look like. I mean, or how you look at it. But the presence of Pratt is probably going to bring the price down. But if this horse is, let's say, 7 or 8 to 1,
Yeah.
you kind of have to take a second look because of the fact that this horse is running with really, really, really good company.
Challenging edition of the Shakertown, wide open, lots of ways you can go as we move to the Toyota Bluegrass, race number 10, the final leg of the pick 5 sequence. Barry, it's just a field of 7, but I legitimately think 5 or 6 of them could win. And if whoever wins this race will probably be, a top 5 Derby horse going into the Derby, because I think it's a pretty solid field. River Thames is good. He was in second in the Fountain of Youth behind Sovereignty, and Sovereignty came right back to finish second in the Florida Derby. You've got Burnham Square. Heck, if we were talking about this race 2 months ago, or not even 2 months ago, like 6 weeks ago, he would have been a major, major player coming off the Holy Bull. He was on everybody's top 5 lists. And then it's kind of disappointing race in the Fountain of Youth, and everybody's sort of forgotten about him completely. Owen Almighty, really impressive Tampa Bay Derby winner. Does he want to go this far? And he's going to have to probably deal with East Avenue right next door, who's trying to get back into form. He was one of the better 2-year-olds in his first 2 starts, but he hasn't been able to get back in his last 2 races. You could probably make excuses for the 2 of them, but you probably don't want to make another excuse. Like a third one would be, okay, he's just done. He's not the same horse. And then you got Chancellor McPatrick, showed a little more positional speed last time, who's probably behind, meaning he probably needed that race. And I think he probably could take a lot out of it. Admiral Dennis, he's never run a race good enough to win this, but I feel like he's a lot better than some of his speed figures would suggest overall. And he's exiting a very live running of the Rebel, where we've already seen horses come back to win the Louisiana Derby and the Arkansas Derby, 1-2 finishers, or 3rd and 4th in that Rebel. So a really intriguing race to look at, Barry.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, like you said, I think any one of these horses can win. Admiral Dennis, the only knock on him is getting out of the gate. He has somewhat gate problems, but other than that, everybody seems to, I guess East Avenue doesn't get out of the gate that great either. But in this race, I'm gonna give, like, personally, I think River Thames is the most talented horse in this field.
Sure.
But I just don't like this horse on the Derby Trail in this spot. Yeah, he's a nice horse and he'd probably run well, but I just don't think the aspirations of the Derby really fit this horse. I think later in the year you'll see River Thames kind of blossom. So I'm gonna fade that one. But Render Judgment and Chancellor McPatrick were both kind of against the track, obviously at Colonial and then the other at Tampa. Owen Almighty was really on a speed favoring track. And I thought Chancellor McPatrick in that race ran the best race despite what was going on, even better than the winner, to be honest.
I loved how much he was able to show more
Speed
positional
to
speed,
get into
just
the race
way
earlier.
closer early on as his first start older. That could be huge if he could just sit mid pack instead of being dead last. That could change everything for him.
And he finished well. If you go back and look, he finished that race well, well ahead of Hill Road and everybody else.
Yep.
So
this is a Barry special too, where he comes back running the same sort of race that he was running last year, speed figures wise.
That's exactly what I was getting to, and I think he's ready to break through. This is going to be his chance. Now, whether he wins or not is another deal, but I think he's ready to step up and I think it's going to show. Same thing with Render Judgment, was kind of against the track with American Promise winging it out there, and didn't run all that badly behind him. I think that goes a long way to get to what we think might be a fair track. This horse will sit a good trip.
I've chased him a few times too. I think both of the long shots in here are better than their overall records are.
Sure.
I have no knocks on them. I wouldn't talk anybody off of them. I worry that it might be a little competitive because there are like 4 or 5 others that are all kind of pretty solid or in solid form. Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think River Thames is probably the horse to beat. I'll probably be using him here. I think I'm going to be like 1, 3, and 6 a lot, Barry.
Sure.
Because I want to give Burnham Square a little bit more of a chance to bounce back. When I watched that race the first time, I remember also being like, wow, what a disappointing effort. And then the second time you watch it back, Sovereignty runs by him, and then he does sort of get into it late. And Neo Equos came back and ran pretty well. Like, he might be headed to the Derby too. That group might be okay. So I think I'm going to give him a shot because I just feel like so many people got off of him so quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought people kind of abandoned him a little bit too soon, but to their credit, or the feather in their cap, those 2 races, the Maiden and the Holy Bull, were 2 perfect trips.
He got great setups.
Didn't get the best of setups in the Fountain of Youth, but I think that experience might go a long way and put this horse in a little bit of more of a tougher kind of mindset to finish races off like that.
And he might be one of those like middle move, early move horses, right? I think last time they were kind of waiting a little bit with Sovereignty, and Sovereignty just outkicked him. But in his 2 wins, he moved pretty early into the race and was like right in it. And he was sitting just off of Tappan Street and then went with Tappan Street. And in the maiden race, he was kind of off a little bit. And then he went right to the front after sitting. So I think he might be a horse you just got to time the move perfectly. And he just could offer you a little bit better value in here. So
yeah, absolutely.
Burnham Square. I'm with you 100% on Chancellor McPatrick. I think he bounces back nicely. Second start off the bench. I think he needed the last race. I think he shakes some of the rust off. Chad Brown said he was probably a work or 2 short going into that race. So coming out of it, he was even like,
I'll let you know this, man. If I was a trainer, I would try to do what they're doing with Chancellor McPatrick.
Completely agree.
Try to get that one race in a nice prep. That, in this case, it was a grade 3 at Tampa. This sets this horse up perfectly, especially when the horse improved off of that layoff. I think he's sitting on a good race.
Yep. And it would be a third off the bench situation if he were to get into the Kentucky Derby.
Right.
So it would all be perfect for Chancellor McPatrick. Barry, my friend, as we get on out of here, why don't you tell everybody where we can find the Notorious OTB this week and anything else that you've got going on?
Yeah, we're covering the Wood Memorial to Aqueduct, and I'm actually going to be at Aqueduct on Saturday.
What? Nice.
Braving the cold.
Look at that.
Man. Awesome. So, yeah, it's my first trip to Aqueduct since I was in high school. So it's been a while. It's going to be nice to see it before they kind of do their thing in New York and shift racing to Belmont and Saratoga. So getting the Aqueduct is cool. The weather is not going to be all that great, but you only live once, right?
Exactly. Barry, safe travels over there. I'll be chatting with you. Hope you have a fantastic time over at Aqueduct. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us here. If you're wherever you're watching, follow us along, subscribe to the YouTube channels if possible, and make sure you have a fantastic weekend. Head to shop.drf.com for anything you need, any of the past performances.